Hello everyone, I'm Jim Longworth and welcome to a special edition of Triad Today. Over the next half hour, I'll be speaking with Governor Pat McCrory about a wide range of issues. But before we get started, here's a brief message from Mark Schaefer, CEO of Truliant Federal Credit Union, who is helping to sponsor this special program.
Hello, I'm Mark Schaefer, CEO of Truliant Federal Credit Union. At Truliant, we're committed to improving your life by valuing what is important to you and helping you guide your future. We believe in innovative thinking that improves our members' lives and the communities we serve. Truliant supports local organizations that focus on financial education and guidance, youth mentoring, and self-sufficiency. Each of us can make a positive impact in our communities by understanding the issues that bind us together as a city, county, state, and nation. That's why we're proud to partner with Triad today to bring you this exclusive interview with Governor Pat McCrory. On behalf of Truliant Federal Credit Union, thank you for joining us for this special presentation.
Thanks, Mark. It's my pleasure to formally introduce you to somebody who's been on the show many times before, and Lori Bates, our director. Let's see our special guest, Governor Pat McCrory, the Honorable Governor Pat McCrory of the state of North Carolina. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me back in the Triad.
Had you a lot of times as mayor and as governor, and I have to tell you, before we get into the questions, I get a lot of heat from you coming on. The first time you came on, the Republicans came after me, said I was too hard on you. The last time you were here, the Democrats got on me and said I was too easy on you. I've decided I'm just going to let you ask me questions.
I think that's a great idea.
Can't win.
So, how do you feel?
Yeah, that's right. Hey, let's start out with something really serious that's still an issue around, and it's going to continue to be. When we're talking about communicable diseases and Ebola specifically, you know that the first case was diagnosed overseas back in early spring. Alan Grayson, you know, from Florida, congressman from Florida, wanted John Kerry and the president to do something, put a travel ban on as early as July. The president refused. Here's my question to you. Did the president put us in danger by not issuing a travel ban back in July? And number two, what do you think about travel bans?
I don't have an answer on whether he put us in danger or not, because I'm not given all the data as governor regarding where all the international travel and what the entry points are and what we're doing at those entry points. I do know this, is that at a minimal, they should have very strong airport operations at either the connection points, which are the main 8 major airports in in the United States, and then make sure that with those same connection points are in the European and other points where any flights are coming in from Africa. So those people are targeted and known, and before they get to this point. Right now, I'm having weekly phone calls, one I had this morning, in fact, with my entire cabinet, and then I stay on the phone with all the health people in North Carolina that are working in DHHS to find out exactly what training do we have, what training do we still need, do they have the equipment, what about our ports, what about our airports. So in North Carolina, literally, Aldona Voss, my Secretary of Health and Human Services, is on probably daily phone calls with me and then weekly phone calls with our entire team. Our biggest issue is putting out rumors right now.
Right.
But
does a governor even have the ability, the authority to deny entrance of somebody into a state?
That's a federal issue. It's a federal issue all the way. I could give input, and we're giving input on where we think improvement needs to be made. But I don't have the data points that the president has, and frankly, we need to have one chief executive make these decisions, and I hope that our president's getting the right information.
I'm going to just a little note to Lori, production note. I'm going to mention this website and then ask you about it. There's an Ebola, I think it answers questions about Ebola, and I think you set this up, Governor. ncdhhs.gov/Ebola.
We set that up 2 weeks, a week ago in North Carolina. So if you have any symptoms, or you know of anyone who might have potential symptoms, or if a hospital or doctor, we want that website to be communicated to immediately. So, and we're literally in constant contact with our hospitals, because what we don't want to have happen is training occurs after someone might get here.
Right.
We want the training to be in place, especially for our nurses and doctors and the personnel that are risking their life dealing with a patient.
Speaking of health issues, you once called the state's Medicaid system, quote, a mess, unquote. Mm-hmm. Since then, you've established some various reforms, set up initiatives, NC tracks, other things. Tell me what's been going on.
It's getting fixed, but there's still some major issues. I mean, when NC Tracks and another computer system opened up under my watch, it was bought by a previous administration. They were smart enough not to turn it on. Yeah. It was supposed to be turned on 6 months prior to me coming into office. sooner or later you got to turn it on. And when we turned it on, my secretary said, we might have to go back to paper because they bought a system in which there is no backup.
Who actually bought that system?
I think the Purdue administration and maybe it was into the Easley administration. It was a 4 or 5 year operation, several hundred millions of dollars, and it was a mess. And part of the mess was they didn't have sufficient training and they didn't have sufficient backup. We turned it on. Sooner or later you got to turn it on, and it was working about at 75% capability. We caught a lot of heat for that. It was going to be $1 million to $2 million a week penalty if we don't deal with it. We went ahead and turned it on. We're now at 98 to 99% capacity, and we're not getting the negative feedback. We're not getting the headlines saying it's now working.
Right.
But at least we're not getting the headlines saying it was a disaster. And it was very, very tough the first 4 or 5 months for my Secretary of Health and Human Services. But Medicaid still is broken there, but we're making. I'm looking for 3 things. One is I'm doing some internal reorganization of Medicaid. It's 16,000 employees within Health and Human Services, a $20 billion budget in the state of North Carolina for all of Health and Human Services,
right,
with Medicaid being a major part of that. The second thing we're attempting to do is we need Medicaid reform, and we're looking at a system in which we have, when a Medicaid patient comes in, an adult or a baby comes in, they can see all the doctors at once and get one bill and share the information as opposed to 3 or 4 different bills, duplicate tests, reducing the cost and having better customer service. And the third thing I'm looking at is I'm talking to Governor Pence in Indiana to see if we should do Medicaid expansion, but if we do it, it should be North Carolina's plan, and North Carolina's plan only with waivers.
Give you 15 seconds to this. Marijuana. Legalize it or not?
No.
Why not?
No, I think it's a much more dangerous drug than people are. The long-term impact on a human being's brain is not known, and initial studies I'm reading, the THC is destroying the brain power of young people right now, and I'm worried about that. And also the mental health and addiction is one of the major issues that I'm working on, and then I'm telling you, we're finding the addiction issue. And by the way, it is addictive.
Yeah.
We already have the alcohol issue. Why expand the drug issue?
I want to ask you about the substance use things that you're doing.
The temptation, by the way, is to say yes because it's the easiest.
It raises revenues and
raises revenue. But if you go, I've talked to the governor of Colorado recently, and he still has problems with it, and he's a Democrat.
Go to a quick break. We'll come back, talk about the economy. We'll be right back. Back now on this special edition of Try It Today as we welcome our special guest who's taken time out of his busy schedule. The Honorable Governor Pat McCrory is here to talk with us. And Governor, let's start off this segment, talking about the economy.
Yeah.
If you look at sort of almost a 2-year span of you being in office, give me a comparison then and now, unemployment rate, unemployment debt, tax rates, new jobs created. What does it look like?
Well, when I came into office on January 5th of 2013, our unemployment rate was the 5th highest in the country. We owed the federal government over $2.5 billion for unemployment compensation. We had a misforecast, my previous administration and legislature had a misforecast of over $500 million on Medicaid. Those are the things we walked into. We're reducing the unemployment compensation debt right now because we reduced the amount of money given. It's now equal to what South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia paid, despite the commercials. They don't compare us to a benchmark neighboring states. We're going to pay off that $2.5 billion debt now within the next 2 years. It'll be down to zero. It's below $600 million at this point in time. That's a huge improvement. We're getting off the credit card. The unemployment, right now, we were number 5. We're now around 35 in unemployment. We've had the largest drop in unemployment next to Florida in the country. We have had an uptick during the past 2 months. We're still trying to evaluate that. Some of it is because a lot of people are coming to North Carolina.
Sure. What about job creation?
I don't have the numbers with me. We're about to get, for the first time in 8 years, net job growth for the first time in 8 years. We are hoping to get that last month, maybe in the next 2 months.
One way of creating that, of course, bringing in new industry. You and I have talked about industry incentives many times before over the years, and I hate them. Have you reformed in any way the way that you're issuing and approving incentives, or maybe putting more conditions on them?
Putting a lot more conditions on them, and now we have a statistical assessment of every industry, whether it's long-term sustainable, whether they're moving up in the market or down in the market or flat in the market. And we're also looking at each area of the state on which industries are needed and which industries will actually last for a long time. I'm looking for long-term sustainable investment. not just a one-time hit for the next election. I'm looking for industries that will invest capital for the next 20 to 30 to 50 years, not just for the next year. So we've turned down some call centers in certain areas because we go, that didn't really add value. We're putting more emphasis on manufacturing. Definitely, I've got a bias toward manufacturing because when you invest in manufacturing, you're making something and building something
Right.
and designing something.
Well, some of the people in the film industry are none too happy with you about eliminating incentives. I think you set up in its place a grant program or something.
correct.
But what was the thinking behind? Because that's, you know, film is kind of a clean industry. I mean, they don't pollute, you know, and they're here
Oh,
and
it's
then they're
not
going.
only it's exciting. I've been in 3 films myself. When I was mayor of Charlotte, I was in 3 movies.
That's
And
right.
I even get a residual from one of the movies. I think I've gotten.
Did you report that?
I have to. I got a $7.35 check last
I'm
year.
going to check on that.
I was at $7.35.
That's
It
good.
was shown in Spain, The Ultimate Gift. I played the mayor of Charlotte.
That's great.
It was a stretch. But the film industry is, what we did was have about a $10 million grant now that's available. But last year, the last 2 years, we spent $80 million cash. That's cash. We don't do that for any other industry. And that's frankly where a lot of the teacher raises went.
Infrastructure is something that attracts new industry that can create jobs too. Give me a minute, if you would, on the 25-year transportation vision.
Well, I'm a firm believer. I'm an Eisenhower man. I'm Dwight David Eisenhower, is someone the Republicans don't talk about enough. But we're feeling the impact of Eisenhower even today because of the highway system that he
Right.
built in the 1950s,
Yeah.
connecting the rural and urban, the east and the west. We're now presenting a similar plan in North Carolina, a rail plan, a road plan, a communications plan, an energy plan. And when I recruit industry, I now show them our 25-year transportation plan. You know, I used to tell you this. I remember coming here, I think I told you this, where, you know, I was running for office, and when I was mayor of Charlotte, I'd go down certain highways, they'd go from 2 lanes to 8 lanes to 2 lanes.
Right.
And it didn't make any sense.
No.
And wherever they were widest, they were named after a politician.
That's called the Fat Cat Highway.
I've never called it that. I've got to
it's
be a little
just-
more politically correct
Well,
than you.
I don't have to.
But wherever they were widest, it probably meant it was a political decision, not a decision
Why?
based upon traffic, economic development, and safety. Those are our 3 criteria.
I think we ran long on the first segment, Brian, so I'm going to go a little short here. Take a quick break. We'll come back. I want to talk about education with the governor, so we'll be right back. Back now on this special edition of Try It today, our very special guest, the Honorable Pat McCrory, Governor of the great state of North Carolina. And Governor, let's talk about education for a little bit. How are you transforming public instruction, public education, the K through 12 instruction? What are you doing with that?
Well, the first thing I did was demand that K through 12, pre-K, community colleges, and universities work as one team, not as 4 different silos. In fact, the 4 leaders by statute were supposed to be meeting quarterly. They had not met for 4 years.
No, I know.
And now I bring them together. We're starting to share budget information. We're starting to see how we can share buildings and resources and technology. That had not been done in a long time. So I convene every one of those meetings. I haven't missed a meeting. So we're talking to each other. The university system's talking to the community
Sounds like a
colleges.
simple thing. It just wasn't done.
Well, it was, and that created silos. And even within the universities, the community colleges, there could be silos where, you know, if you're not for Carolina, that means you're for State or Appalachian,
Right.
Winston-Salem State, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm going no more silos. We can't afford it anymore. We've got to have teamwork. And so I'm looking at it as a K1 through 20 process.
That's good. That's a good way to do it. Now let me ask you about your Safer Schools Task Force. Didn't I read somewhere about that? Does that exist? Or did I make that?
Yeah, it's one of the first things we did. Of course, we had the terrible tragedy in Colorado and out west, and our head of Department of Public Safety has a task force where we're implementing communication efforts if someone gets into a school, safety efforts, and also educational efforts. We're finding out kids, we need to reach the kids and let us know what the heck's going on a campus. And nowadays, the kids are exposed to the drugs and to the weapons, nothing like we had when we were younger.
No.
And this, even in elementary school, we've got kids with weapons and drugs and adults coming into the schools, and we've got to make sure we're prepared to respond. But our first goal is to protect these schools.
Yeah, some of the kids, I've talked to school resource officers who, if they have good relationships with the kids, they'll come to the kids will come to the SROs and tell them the stuff, but not all schools have enough of those. Let me ask you about, I want to pick at you about something here, and it's a serious topic, but the same topic. I know you believe in safe schools. I know you want to cut down on any violence, internal or external, and yet you and the General Assembly have opposed assault ban weapons, a ban on assault weapons, and also have made it easier through new legislation for people to carry handguns in lots more places. Now, doesn't that, I mean, it looks like
only carry handguns if they have a license, a permit to do that. So you have to go through training to do that. You cannot just carry handguns anywhere. You have to have a permit to do it and go through the training and get registered. So that's the way the headlines mislead that, but you have to have a permit to do it. And I've also continued to work with your great sheriff in this area, B.J. Barnes, to make sure the sheriffs still have control over the permits or denying permits, especially if they know of a person who's been arrested over and over again for things like domestic violence.
Why not ban assault weapons then?
Well, again, the definition of assault weapons is a real confusing thing. You know, my thing is, if the people are trained in the weapons, they're not the ones causing us the problem. If the people causing us the problems are the ones that are going to break the law anyway.
And people with mental illnesses?
Mental illnesses, and that's why I want to keep some of that power with the sheriffs.
Well, let me
so they can keep track of people with mental illnesses that can't get any type of weapon if they have a record of that mental illness.
Earlier, you touched on something about substance abuse, and speaking of that and underage drinking, what are you doing to try to address that with younger kids now?
You know, first thing I've done is I've got a responsibility on every one of our college campuses. When a parent drops off their kid on a college campus, they assume, okay, the state's responsible for them. So what I've done is set up college campuses education and enforcement policy, where we're now enforcing drug and alcohol policies on our campuses. I just spoke at University of Chapel Hill in front of all the professors, and no longer, I said this, no longer can we allow our universities to become the laboratories to experiment with drugs and alcohol, as though it's a rite of passage. We've seen the long-term impact, dropout rate, harm of the students, and even death of the students, and long-term addiction. And we kind of went, they're just in college.
Well, there's a lot of binge drinking going on.
Binge drinking is one of our most serious issues. It's kind of laughed at. We go, look at them. You know, we did that in college. The dilemma is a certain high percentage of them aren't recovering. And we're investing, you know, most people don't realize, but for every college student, the taxpayers are subsidizing that college student over $20,000 a year. Most people don't know that. You know, the on cost of a campus to go to school is about $40,000. The student pays half of that. We pay the other half. If they're drinking and doing drugs, they're destroying their brain, and they're also not giving us a return on their investment. And if they don't want to take that seat, I'll move in someone who does want to take that seat and learn and exercise their brain and learn his skills so they can get a job.
I was glad to see that.
And so I'm being real up front about it. And because my generation's partially blamed for it, including me.
Yeah, I know.
Where people did excessive drinking. I didn't do the drugs, but it's inexcusable.
Well, it was the whole fraternity thing and throwing parties.
It's Animal House.
Yeah.
And now and I said this at UNC Chapel campus, we're setting up AA programs, trying on every campus. Because a lot of kids feel pressured at the tailgate parties, drink as much at the fraternity houses. We want to give them choice now.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back for our final segment, and I'll just talk about a whole different range of issues, as many as we can get in, so we'll be right back. Back now in our final segment of this special half hour with our very special guest, the Honorable Pat McCrory, Governor of the state of North Carolina. Governor, no particular theme to this last segment. I want to hit as many things as we can. One is, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the coal ash spill by Duke Energy, which happened early in 2014. There were some people
Coal ash spill.
Yeah,
at Dan River.
It's spill in the Dan River.
I apparently did it.
Yeah, well,
I saw a commercial the other day said that I did it.
Well, of course, I mean, you used
coal
to.
ash on
People say, well, the governor used to work for Duke Energy, so either A, he favors.
Should I own up to it on your show and say I went out there one late night?
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do that. But the thing is, as somebody who had a relationship with Duke Energy, here's the question.
They're like a family to me.
All right, so they're like a family. So would that make you less? Would it make you more reticent to be punitive with them and to take action?
Absolutely not. In fact, if anything, I know what they did wrong, because I used to work in engineering, and they out of sight, out of mind, the financial people and the engineering people didn't do their job. And frankly, the politicians before me didn't do their job either. And in fact, even passed legislation, 09, 010, you don't see this in the commercials, which weakened some of the standards for coal ash. And yet it happened to occur in my first year, at the end of my first year. And
That was with Democratic legislature too, wasn't it? When
And governor, absolutely. Some of that legislation was passed in '09,
So even though you have a
which
relationship with them,
grandfathered dam regulations.
really?
Yeah, it was just ridiculous.
Well, the thing is, even now, there's only a portion of that, I think 37,000 tons or whatever has been actually cleaned up.
We are actually very lucky. That could have been we haven't had, to our knowledge, a fish killed or a water system messed up. We're very lucky. If that pipe had been another area of that dam, it could have been like the Tennessee spill. But we're fortunate, lesson learned, and now we're requiring it to be fixed.
Let me shift to a social issue of gay marriage. Every other day we hear something that says, oh, we have closure now. This judge, that judge says this or that.
Yeah.
One high court, as you know, said not long ago, well, you can't have a ban on gay marriage. Now we hear from another judge, well, it's okay if certain GOP legislators want to fight this for a while, want to find an appeal point. Do you continue as a person and as a governor to oppose gay marriage?
I oppose gay marriage, but I'm also, as governor, required to enforce the constitutional laws not only North Carolina but of the United States of America. That's what I put my hand on the Bible on, and right now the courts have said it's legal.
So
It's
that's
still being appealed, but the courts say you need to enact it, and the appeal, according to my legal advisors, are saying it's appeal just to be heard, but they'll go back to the previous court ruling.
But as Pat McCrory, the man, not as a governor, why do you oppose gay marriage?
I believe marriage should be between one man and one woman. 60-some% of the voters believe that. But again, it's my job to follow the law and uphold the law, and I'll do just that, and I won't play games with it. And we've already adjusted our forms and our processes and procedures over the past several weekends to make it happen, whether I agree or not. We won the photo ID law.
Right.
The Supreme Court ruled on that. Sorry, the other side's got to accept it.
Right.
The courts ruled it's legal. I lost on the gay marriage. I have to enforce the law.
Right.
So,
but now let's voter ID. I'm glad you mentioned that, because in a sense there was one judge that said, look, I'm going to strike down a couple elements. For example,
Right.
the same-day registration. That didn't hold very long. A lot of people are looking toward 2016, and my question then, looking out to there, do you think that what you passed in totality will be exactly what it is in 2016, or will there be parts that will be shaved off of that?
I think what we passed will be passed in totality, and the courts have ruled for this election everything that we've passed except for the photo ID, because we gave till 2016 to have that enforced. Everything else is being enforced right now. The Supreme Court and other courts have agreed to it. In
But
fact,
Governor,
that one court that rejected 2 or 3 items,
Right.
the Supreme Court accepted it. And that's where and on the other issue of the marriage issue, the Supreme Court refused to hear the lower court's ruling.
But there
And
just
that
wasn't
means
that much fraud identified, voter fraud.
If you don't look for it, you aren't going to find it. And they weren't looking for it. And I'm telling you right now, there are so many ways that you can have voter fraud in North Carolina because of the lax enforcement. It's like me not looking for us improper trading in the stock market. If you're not going to look for it, they'll go, you haven't proved there is any. I'm telling you right now, there are ways that out-of-state students can vote both in their state where they came from and in North Carolina. And that can impact elections.
I want to do 30 seconds get you to do 30 seconds on drones, because you're a guy who believes in less government intrusion, and yet now, because of the spending bill that they stuck it into, drones can go, look at what I'm doing without a warrant.
I've got some concerns about, we're waiting for some federal government action, and hopefully within the next month or two you're going to hear more from this administration. I'm concerned about some of the privacy items, and I'm concerned about homeland security, and I'm concerned about safety. We just found out last week there was a drone over a high school football game with teenagers running the drone, and I'm going,
That's not right.
really? I wonder if that thing crashed into the crowd.
It'd be bad. And before time runs out, I got to ask you, and not to flatter you or anything, but you always look in better shape every time I see you with every successive. Do you
Stress.
do you have a regimen you go by to
No,
stay in
I just
shape?
started. I just had my birthday the other day. I've turned 58, and I've worked out twice in 2 days. So that's about it.
Worked out twice in 2
I walk
years.
a lot and eat too many chocolate chip cookies and ride in a car, travel in this beautiful, beautiful state.
You're not going to wait another year to come here, are you?
No, anytime. You invite me, I'll come back.
Thank you, Governor.
Thanks a lot. Give me an excuse to get back to the
I
triumph.
appreciate it. Well, that's it for this special edition of Try It Today, but I want to thank Mark Schaefer and Truliant Federal Credit Union for helping to make this program possible. Also want to thank, of course, Governor Pat McCrory for taking time out of his demanding schedule to be with us today. For more information about what's going on in state government, you can visit the website the governor set up. That's governor.state.nc.us. For all of us here, Try It Today, I'm Jim Longworth. We'll see you next week.